The alley behind Zintra Bazaar stank of scorched synth oil, overripe moon melons, and the sharp tang of ozone left behind by faulty anti-grav crates. Dust swirled in lazy spirals under the twin suns of Viridia 7, catching on discarded circuit boards and crumpled nutrient wrappers. This was where the forgotten things gathered, including Lyra. She was barely knee-high to a human, with smooth, deep violet skin that shimmered faintly like amethyst under direct light, and a cascade of silky white hair tied back in 2 uneven braids. Her eyes, wide and luminous like liquid onyx, were fixed on the shattered remains at her feet. A tiny, hand-carved toy no bigger than her palm. It had once been a little starhopper figurine, whittled from iridescent moonwood by her late grandmother. Now it was splinters and sorrow. 3 figures loomed over her, casting long, jagged shadows that seemed to swallow the light. They were older, gangly adolescents from the dominant Vexian clan, with bulbous foreheads, mottled green-gray skin, and the kind of cruel smirks that came naturally to those who'd never been told no. Their leader, Zorv, kicked the largest shard of the toy with the toe of his reinforced boot. "Still crying over junk, Lyra?" he sneered, his voice like grinding gears. "Your kind doesn't even belong in this quadrant. Go crawl back to the junkyard where you came from." Lyra didn't answer. She just knelt, trembling, trying to gather the pieces with fingers too small and too shaky. Her breath hitched in quiet, shuddering waves. She knew better than to look up. On Viridia 7, orphans, especially those of mixed heritage like her, part Vexian, part something softer, something unknown, were invisible until someone wanted to remind them they were less than dust. Zorv crouched, looming close enough that his breath ruffled her white hair. "What's wrong? Too broken to fix." He laughed, and his 2 cronies, Krell and Miv, echoed him like programmed drones. "Maybe you should ask your imaginary parents for a new one." "Oh wait." He feigned sudden realization, slapping his own forehead with exaggerated flair. "They're dead. Or worse, they didn't want you. Left you like trash. Just like this." He stomped hard on the toy's head, reducing it to powder. That was when something shifted in the alley. It wasn't sound, not at first. Just a change in the air, like before lightning strikes. The dust seemed to still. The distant hum of hover traffic muted. Even the twin suns felt suddenly dimmer. From the mouth of the alley, a figure stepped into view. He was human, rare enough on Viridia 7 to draw stares in the market. But here, in this forgotten crack between rusted walls, he looked almost unreal. Tall, broad-shouldered but lean, with short, tousled brown hair and eyes the color of storm clouds. He wore a faded gray work tunic, utility belt slung low on his hips, and scuffed boots that had seen more planets than most Viridians would in 10 lifetimes. His name was Joran Vance, former field medic, current freelance salvage hauler. And, though he'd never admit it, something of a quiet guardian to strays, animal, mechanical, or otherwise. He'd been passing through the bazaar to trade salvaged power cells for rations when he heard the laughter. Not the joyful kind, the sharp, cutting kind that always meant someone was getting hurt. He followed it like a hound follows blood. Now, standing there, hands loose at his sides, Joran didn't scowl. He didn't shout. He simply looked at Zorv, the way a man might look at a malfunctioning drone before calmly shutting it down. "Pick it up," Joran said. His voice was quiet, but it carried like a blade through silk. Zorv straightened, startled, then sneered again. "Who's this? A lost meat sack? Go back to your cargo hold, human. This doesn't concern you." Joran took 1 step forward, then another, each stride deliberate, unhurried, yet closing the distance with unnerving speed. "It does now," he said. Krell stepped in front of Lyra, puffing his chest. "You think you can just walk in here and—" Joran moved. It wasn't flashy. No dramatic leap, no roaring battle cry. Just a blur of motion. A sidestep, a twist, and Krell was on the ground, groaning, clutching his wrist. Joran hadn't even touched his face. Only applied precise pressure to a nerve cluster in the elbow. Efficient, clean, merciful. Miv lunged next, swinging a pipe he'd pulled from his belt. Joran caught it mid-swing, twisted it free like it was made of foam, and tossed it aside. Before Miv could react, Joran had him by the collar, lifted just enough to meet his eyes, then dropped him unceremoniously into a pile of discarded coolant cans. The clang echoed like a gong. Zorv, now alone, backed up, eyes wide. You can't do this. My father's on the Trade Council. He'll have you deported." Joran didn't answer right away. Instead, he knelt beside Lyra, Gently, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small multi-tool. Not to fight, but to fix. With careful fingers, he began collecting the largest fragments of the toy. Then, with surprising delicacy, he aligned the pieces, sealed the fractures with a bead of nano-adhesive from his tool, and smoothed the surface with a micropolisher. It wouldn't be perfect. Some cracks would remain, but it would hold. It would be whole again. Only then did he look up at Zorv. "You broke something that mattered," Joran said, his voice low but carrying the weight of 1,000 unspoken battles. "Not because it was valuable, not because it was rare, but because it was hers. And you thought that made it okay because she's small, because she's alone, because she's different." He stood, the repaired toy cradled in his palm like something sacred. He held it out to Lyra. Her hands trembled as she took it. Tears spilled freely now, not from fear, but from disbelief that someone had seen her, had seen the value in what she loved. Joran turned fully to Zorv. "You want to feel big? Go lift a starship engine. Go rescue someone from a collapsing tunnel. Don't tear down someone just to make yourself taller. That's not strength. That's cowardice wrapped in noise." Zorv's face flushed a sickly green. He opened his mouth to retort, but nothing came out. His bravado had evaporated like morning dew under Viridia's suns. He shot a glance at his groaning friends, then turned and ran, boots slapping against the permacrete, disappearing into the labyrinth of alleys. The silence that followed was thick but not empty. It hummed with relief. Joran crouched again, this time at Lyra's eye level. "You okay?" he asked softly. She nodded, clutching the toy like a talisman. Thank you," she whispered, voice barely audible over the distant whine of a hover scooter. "Don't thank me," he said, offering a small, lopsided smile. "Thank yourself for not giving up on it, even when it was broken." He stood, brushing dust from his knees, and started to walk away. "Wait!" Lyra called out, her voice suddenly stronger. Joran paused, glancing back. "What's your name?" she asked. "Joran," he said. She held up the toy. "Her name is Nova." He smiled again, genuine this time. "Nice to meet you, Nova." But as he turned to leave, Lyra took a hesitant step forward. "Joran, do you have a home?" The question hung in the air, fragile as glass. Joran stopped. He didn't answer right away. Truth was, he didn't, not really. His ship, the Rust Sparrow, was more storage locker than sanctuary. He drifted from port to port, job to job, never staying long enough to plant roots, never letting anyone get close enough to ask if he was lonely. But looking at Lyra, her violet skin stained with alley grime, her white hair tangled, her eyes holding a universe of quiet hope, he felt something shift inside him, like a gear clicking into place after years of grinding misalignment. "I've got a ship," he said slowly. "Not much, but it's got a bunk. And a heater that works. Most of the time." Lyra's eyes widened. Could I see it?" Joran hesitated. He wasn't naive. Taking in a child, especially an alien child on a planet where bureaucracy bled you dry, was complicated. Dangerous, even. He'd seen too many well-meaning souls crushed under the weight of systems that didn't care about kindness. But then he remembered the toy, how she'd knelt in the dirt, trying to gather what was broken, refusing to let go. "You ever flown before?" he asked. She shook her head. "Only in dreams." "Then today's your lucky day," he said, extending a hand. She took it without hesitation. Her fingers were small, cool, but surprisingly strong. As they walked out of the alley together, the twin suns casting long shadows behind them, the bazaar seemed to part like a curtain. Merchants paused their haggling. Street vendors stopped mid-scoop. Even the ever-present drone of commerce quieted for a beat. A human and a violet-skinned girl, hand in hand, heading toward the spaceport where a battered freighter waited among sleek cruisers and corporate yachts. Back in the alley, the shattered remnants of cruelty lay forgotten, already being buried under the next layer of dust. Days turned into weeks aboard the Rust Sparrow. What began as a temporary refuge became something else entirely. Something neither had expected. Lyra, it turned out, was a mechanical prodigy. She could diagnose a failing plasma conduit by sound alone and rewire a NAV computer with tools cobbled from scrap. Joran, in turn, found himself doing things he hadn't done in years. Cooking actual meals instead of rehydrated paste, telling stories from Earth, a planet Lyra had only seen in data chips, even laughing real, unguarded laughter when she rigged the ship's AI to greet him every morning as Captain Fluffernutter. Their bond deepened not through grand declarations, but through small, shared silences. Watching nebulae bloom through the cockpit viewport, patching hull breaches during micrometeor showers, dancing awkwardly to old Earth jazz in zero gravity during downtime. But peace, Joran knew, was fragile. One evening, as they docked at a neutral trade hub called Kestra's Reach, trouble found them. Lyra had gone ahead to barter for replacement capacitors. She'd earned Joran's trust enough to handle small errands alone. But when an hour passed and she didn't return, Joran's gut tightened. He found her near the docking bay entrance, surrounded by 3 armored enforcers wearing the insignia of the Vexian Trade Authority. Their leader, a broad-shouldered enforcer with a scar across his snout, held Lyra's wrist in an iron grip. "Stowaway," the enforcer barked as Joran approached. "Unregistered minor. Mixed blood. No Guardian documentation. She's being remanded to the Orphan Processing Center." "That's not true," Joran said, stepping forward, voice calm but edged. "She's with me." The enforcer laughed. "You? A human drifter? You think the Vexian registry recognizes your kind as legal guardians? She's property of the state until proven otherwise." Lyra's eyes locked onto Joran's, wide with fear but also fierce determination. "I'm not property," she said, voice trembling but clear. "I'm Lyra Vey," the enforcer sneered. "Names don't matter in the processing center, runt." Joran didn't raise his voice. He didn't reach for a weapon. Instead, he pulled a small data slate from his belt. "Check this." The enforcer scoffed but glanced at it out of habit. His eyes widened. It was a provisional guardianship petition, filed, stamped, and verified by a neutral arbiter on Viridia 7. Joran had spent 3 sleepless nights navigating bureaucratic labyrinths, bribing clerks, and calling in every favor he had to get it processed before they left port. It wasn't perfect, it was temporary, conditional, tied to his credit line and cargo manifests, but it was enough. "Legal?" the enforcer muttered, scanning the code. "Enough to make you look foolish if you drag her off," Joran said evenly. The enforcer hesitated. Then, with a grunt of disgust, he released Lyra's wrist. "Don't leave port without updating your registry, human. Next time, we won't be so polite." As they walked away, Lyra clung to Joran's hand like a lifeline. "You did that for me?" she whispered. "I told you," he said, squeezing her hand gently. "You're not property. You're Lyra Vey, and you've got a ship to get back to." That night, aboard the Rust Sparrow, Lyra didn't sleep right away. She sat in the dim glow of the cockpit, Nova, the repaired toy, propped on the console beside her. "Joran?" she asked quietly. He was checking fuel levels but turned. "Yeah. Why did you help me? Really?" He leaned back in the pilot's chair, staring at the stars swirling outside. "Because once, a long time ago, I was broken too, and someone saw me before I shattered completely. I never got to thank them, so I guess I'm paying it forward." Lyra nodded slowly, then slid from her seat and walked over. She didn't say anything, just wrapped her small arms around his waist in a tight hug. Joran, after a moment of stunned stillness, hugged her back. Outside, the stars burned cold and distant, but inside the Rust Sparrow, something warm and unbreakable was growing. Months passed. They took jobs, some legal, some less so, hauling cargo across contested sectors, repairing mining drones on asteroid outposts, once even ferrying a group of refugee scholars fleeing a corporate purge. Through it all, Lyra grew, not just in height, but in confidence. She wore a tool belt now, custom fit, with her name stitched in glowing thread. She negotiated contracts with merchants twice her size. And when pirates tried to board them over a shipment of rare bioluminescent fungi, it was Lyra who rerouted power to the rear thrusters, allowing Joran to execute a maneuver that sent the attackers spinning into a debris field. They became a legend in certain circles. The human and his violet shadow, the salvage duo who always showed up when things got messy. But the past has a way of circling back. One day, a priority hail crackled through the comm. It wasn't a job offer. It was a distress signal from Viridia 7. Specifically from a derelict orbital station that had once been a Vexian cultural archive. The message was fragmented, glitching, but one phrase repeated like a heartbeat. "They're coming for the children." Joran recognized the voice instantly. It was Lyra's old caretaker from the orphan enclave, a gentle botanist named Telly who'd given her the moonwood for Nova. Without a word, Joran plotted a course. Lyra sat beside him, face grim. "The processing center's been relocating orphans," she said quietly. "They say it's for re-education, but the ones who come back, they're different, quiet, Empty. Joran didn't answer. He just pushed the engines to maximum. When they reached the station, it was already under siege. Smoke curled from ruptured corridors. Emergency lights flashed red through shattered viewports. And in the central chamber, huddled behind overturned data consoles, were a dozen children, Lyra's old friends. Among them was Miko, a shy boy with silver scales and eyes full of terror. Standing over them, armed with stun batons and wearing black uniforms with the insignia of the Vexian Purification Front, were soldiers. Not enforcers. Militia. Fanatics. Their leader, a gaunt woman with cybernetic eyes, sneered as Joran and Lyra entered. The stray and her pet human. How touching. But this doesn't concern you. It does now, Lyra said, stepping forward, voice steady. The woman laughed. You think you're a hero now? You're still just a half-breed freak. And your human won't save you this time. Joran didn't wait for the taunt to finish. He moved like lightning, dodging a stun baton swing, disarming the nearest soldier with a twist, using the weapon to crack another across the temple. Lyra, meanwhile, activated the station's emergency lockdown protocol from a wall terminal she'd secretly memorized as a child. Blast doors slammed shut, isolating sections, trapping the soldiers in a maze of their own making. Chaos erupted, but Joran wasn't fighting to kill. He fought to disable, to protect, to create an opening. Lyra, get them to the docking bay, he shouted over the din. She didn't argue. She herded the children, Miko clinging to her hand, toward the escape pods. The cybernetic-eyed leader lunged at Joran with a vibroblade. He blocked it with a metal pipe ripped from the wall, sparks flying. They grappled, crashing through consoles, glass shattering around them. You don't belong here, she hissed. This world isn't for your kind. Maybe not, Joran grunted, headbutting her. But it's hers, and I'll be damned if I let you take it from her. With a final shove, he sent her stumbling into a live power conduit. She convulsed, then collapsed. By the time he reached the docking bay, Lyra had already loaded the children into the Rust Sparrow. Miko was at the controls, surprisingly capable, having watched Lyra fly 100 times. Go! Joran yelled, leaping aboard as the ramp hissed shut. The ship tore free of the station just as reinforcements arrived. Gunships descending like vultures. But Joran didn't run. He flew straight at them. Then, at the last second, he cut the engines and dropped into the planet's upper atmosphere. Turbulence rattled the hull. Alarms blared. But they made it through, scorched but intact, landing in the remote canyons beyond Viridia City. For days they hid, tended wounds, shared rations, told stories under alien constellations. And slowly the children began to smile again. Back in the city, rumors spread. Of a human who fought like a storm. Of a violet girl who outsmarted armies. Of a ship that became a sanctuary. The Vexian Purification Front declared them enemies of the state. Bounty hunters scoured the sectors. But for every hunter who came looking, 3 more orphans found their way to the Rust Sparrow. Whispered directions passed in alleys. Coded messages in public comm channels. Joran never asked for this. Never wanted to be a symbol. But as he watched Lyra teach Miko how to recalibrate a warp coil, or comfort a crying toddler with a lullaby in a language she'd invented, he realized something profound. Home wasn't a place. It was the people you chose to protect. And as the Rust Sparrow lifted off once more, its cargo hold now filled not with scrap, but with laughter, with hope, with the quiet hum of a dozen futures unfolding, Joran knew he'd finally found his. The stars ahead were endless. The dangers, real. But for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel alone. And somewhere in the back, Lyra held Nova close, whispering, "We're going to be okay." Outside, the universe turned, vast and indifferent. But inside that little ship, something rare and beautiful was being built. One repaired toy, one rescued child, one act of stubborn kindness at a time. The Rust Sparrow wasn't just a ship anymore. It was a rumor, a myth whispered in the shadowed corners of 100 starports. The Ghost Barge, some called it. Others, more hopeful, named it the Haven. But myths have a way of attracting not only the lost but the powerful. 3 months after the Viridia 7 rescue, while docked at a remote asteroid refueling station called Cinder's Rest, Joran received an encrypted priority hail, one that bypassed public channels and bore the royal crest of the Xerian Dominion. Purple on silver, with twin comets arcing over a throne. It was the personal sigil of Empress Velara. Lyra froze when she saw it. Her face, usually bright with curiosity or mischief, went pale beneath her violet skin. "That's my mother's seal," she whispered. Joran frowned. "Your mother? I thought. I never told you," Lyra said quietly, eyes fixed on the flickering emblem. "Because I didn't know if it was true. Telly told me once, when I was little, that my mother wasn't just anyone. That she was Velara Ve, the Empress's youngest sister. Disgraced. Banished for marrying outside the bloodline. For loving a human scholar from the fringe worlds. They said she died in a shuttle crash. But Telly, she always left a candle burning on my birthday. Just in case." Joran's blood ran cold. If Lyra was who she thought she was, if even a fraction of that story was true, then she wasn't just an orphan. She was royalty, and more dangerously, she was a political threat. He opened the message. The Empress's face filled the screen, regal, severe, with the same deep purple skin and white hair as Lyra, but hardened by decades of rule. Her eyes, however, held something unexpected. Grief. "Joran Vance," she began, voice resonant and calm. "I know you're protecting her, and for that, I owe you a debt I cannot repay. My sister, Lyriel, was not lost in a crash. She was murdered by those who sought to purge the dominion of impure blood. Her child, my niece, was smuggled away. I searched for years. Now I know she lives." Lyra's breath caught. The Empress leaned closer, her expression softening almost imperceptibly. "Lyra, if you can hear this, come home. Not as a fugitive, not as a secret, as my heir. The throne needs more than strength. It needs compassion. And you have shown more of it in one alley than my court has in a century." The message ended. Silence pressed in like vacuum. Lyra didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply stood there, hands clenched at her sides, staring at the blank screen as if it had stolen something from her, and given her something even heavier in return. Joran knelt beside her. "You don't have to go. But they're still out there," she said, voice trembling. "The Purification Front. They didn't just want orphans. They were hunting me. They always were." He hadn't wanted to believe it, but now it made sense. The precision of their attacks, the obsession with blood purity. Lyra wasn't collateral damage. She was the target. That night, as the others slept, Lyra crept to the cockpit. Joran found her there, fingers hovering over the NAV computer, plotting a course to the Xerian capital world, Erthos Prime. "I can't ask you to come," she said without turning. "It's a gilded cage, and you're free." Joran leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "Funny. I never felt free until I found you in that alley." She turned then, eyes glistening. "What if they take you from me? What if they say you're unfit? Human, outsider, just a salvage man?" He walked over, placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then we'll remind them that sometimes the most valuable things in the galaxy aren't made of gold or power, but of grit, loyalty, and a stubborn refusal to let bullies win." She smiled faintly. "Even royal ones? Especially royal ones." 2 weeks later, the Rust Sparrow descended through the pearlescent clouds of Erthos Prime. The capital city, Luminera, sprawled below like a jewel box, towers of living crystal, bridges woven from light, gardens that bloomed in harmonic resonance. It was breathtaking and utterly alien. They were met not by soldiers, but by a single figure in flowing indigo robes. Empress Velara herself. She stood alone on the landing platform, wind stirring her white hair. When Lyra stepped off the ramp, the Empress didn't speak. She simply opened her arms. And Lyra, after a heartbeat of hesitation, ran into them. Joran watched from the ramp, heart tight in his chest. He expected guards to seize him, expected protocol, suspicion, exile. Instead, the Empress turned to him, her eyes sharp but not unkind. "You broke their pride," she said simply, "and mended hers. That is rare magic, Joran Vance. Rarer than thrones." He gave a small nod. "Just did what anyone would have done." "No," she corrected gently. "Only those with true courage do what no one else will." In the days that followed, Lyra was formally presented to the Xerian High Court as Princess Lyra Ve, heir to the Sapphire Throne. The announcement sent ripples across the Dominion. Traditionalists grumbled. Reformers rejoiced. The Purification Front went silent, too silent. And then, the twist no one saw coming. During the coronation banquet, held in a grand hall where chandeliers floated on antigrav fields and music was played on instruments made of solidified starlight, Joran noticed something odd. The Empress's chief advisor, a severe woman named High Prelate Zyn, kept watching Lyra with an expression that wasn't admiration, but calculation. Later that night, Joran awoke to an alarm. Not a ship alarm. Palace alert. He rushed to Lyra's quarters to find her gone. A trail of scuffed slippers led to the Empress's private observatory. There, beneath a dome that mirrored the night sky, stood Lyra and Zyn. But the prelate wasn't threatening her. She was kneeling. "Your Grace," Zyn said, voice thick with emotion. "I served your mother. I failed to protect her. But I've protected you by staying close to the throne, by feeding false intelligence to the purifiers, by letting them believe you were dead." Lyra stared, stunned. You're the one who sent Telly to me?" Zyn nodded. "And the one who forged your records, who erased your trail, who made sure the purifiers chased shadows while you grew strong." Joran stepped forward from the shadows. "And the distress call from the archive station?" Zyn met his gaze evenly. "Real, but timed. I needed you both to act, to reveal your bond, to prove Lyra's worth not just as blood, but as heart. The court needed to see her courage. And yours." Lyra's eyes widened. "You used us." "No," Zyn said softly. "I trusted you. There's a difference." The Empress appeared then, standing in the arched doorway, a sad smile on her lips. "I knew," she admitted. "Not all of it, but enough. Sometimes, to heal a wound, you must let it bleed first." Lyra looked at Joran. He gave a slight nod. Not everything was betrayal. Some deceptions were born of love. But the final twist came the next morning. A coded message arrived not from the Dominion, but from deep space. From a ship registered to no known faction. The sender? A name Joran hadn't heard in 15 years. Captain Elias Rourke. His old commanding officer. The man who'd left him for dead on a battle-scarred moon during the Keswick War. The message was short. "They're coming for her. Not the purifiers. Something worse. The Voidborn. They know what she is. And they want her blood not for the throne. For the ritual. Come to the drift. You'll know the place. Bring the girl. And don't trust the stars." Joran's hands shook as he read it. The Voidborn weren't a faction. They were a myth. Fanatics who believed bloodlines held cosmic power, and that mixing human and Xerian DNA had unlocked something ancient, something that could open the veil between dimensions. And Lyra, she wasn't just an heir. She was the key. That night, as the twin moons of Erthos cast silver light over the palace gardens, Joran found Lyra sitting by the reflection pool, Nova in her lap. "They want more than my throne," she said, as if reading his thoughts. "They want my soul." He sat beside her. "Then we take it off the table." She looked up. "How?" He smiled. A real, dangerous smile she hadn't seen since the alley. "By making sure no one ever finds the lock." The next day, the official announcement came. Princess Lyra Vey would undertake a diplomatic journey to the outer sectors to foster goodwill. In truth, the Rust Sparrow, refitted with stealth plating and cloaking tech gifted by a grateful empress, vanished into the drift, a nebula-dense region where sensors failed and legends were born. And somewhere in the dark, between stars that no longer felt safe, a human and a violet-skinned girl flew not toward a throne, but toward a truth neither of them fully understood. But this time they weren't running. They were hunting. Because if the Voidborn thought Lyra was just a prize to be captured, they hadn't met the man who'd once knelt in an alley to fix a broken toy, and by doing so, had rebuilt a universe. The drift wasn't just a region of space. It was a graveyard of dead stars, tangled in cosmic dust and whispering radiation storms that scrambled sensors and played tricks on the mind. Ships that entered rarely left. Those that did spoke of phantom signals, ghost echoes, and lights that moved against the current of reality. It was the perfect place to disappear, and the perfect place to ambush. Joran kept the Rust Sparrow's engines at a low hum, running silent, cloaked, hugging the magnetosphere of a collapsed neutron star. Lyra sat beside him in the co-pilot seat, her white hair pulled back tight, eyes scanning the static-filled viewscreen. She'd stopped calling the toy Nova out loud, but she kept it clipped to her belt like a good luck charm. Something small and solid to hold onto when the universe felt too vast and too cruel. They found Captain Elias Rourke not in a warship or a fortress, but aboard a derelict deep-range science vessel called the Whisper's End, drifting near the edge of the drift's inner veil. The hull was scarred, patched with mismatched plates, and half its lights were dead. But the distress beacon pulsed a familiar code, one Joran and Elias had used during covert ops, back when they still trusted each other. I don't like this, Lyra said as they docked. Neither do I, Joran replied. But if the Voidborn are real and they're after you, I need to know what Elias knows. Inside, the ship was cold, air thick with the scent of ozone and old blood. They found Elias in the command center, slumped in a chair, one arm cybernetic, the other trembling. He looked older, harder, haunted. When he saw Joran, his eyes filled with something like relief and shame. Took you long enough, Elias rasped. You left me to die, Joran said flatly, hand resting near his sidearm. I tried to go back, Elias said, voice cracking. The command shuttle was hit. I thought you were vaporized. By the time I circled, there was nothing but ash and silence. He looked at Lyra. But you're more than I was told. More than even the Empress knows. He pulled up a holographic file. Ancient, encrypted, stamped with symbols that made Lyra's skin prickle. The Voidborn aren't just fanatics, Elias said. They're descendants of the first convergence, a failed experiment centuries ago, when Xerian mystics tried to merge human DNA with their own to open a gateway to the astral sea. It almost worked, but the subjects went mad. The project was buried. Except, your mother, Lyriel, wasn't just a rebel. She was part of a secret effort to reverse it, to stabilize the blend. And she succeeded. With you. Lyra stared at her own hands. So I'm what? A weapon? No, Elias said firmly. You're a bridge. The Voidborn believe if they spill your blood during the eclipse convergence, a rare alignment happening in 3 days, they can force the veil open and claim godhood. And they've already begun their rites. Joran's jaw tightened. Where? Elias tapped the screen. A red dot pulsed on the edge of the drift. Sanctum Obscura, a black hole-shrouded asteroid once used as a Xerian penitentiary. Now a temple of nightmares. We stop them there, Joran said. No, Lyra said suddenly. We don't stop them. We finish what my mother started. She explained her plan with a calm that belied her years. The astral sea wasn't a place of power. It was a place of balance. The gateway wasn't meant to be forced open. It was meant to be invited. And only someone with both bloodlines, stable, willing, and full of compassion, could do it safely. You'd be risking your life, Joran said. She looked at him, eyes shining. You risked yours for a broken toy. Let me risk mine for a broken world. He couldn't argue. Not really. Because he saw it now. The same stubborn kindness that had knelt in that alley was now ready to face gods. 3 days later, during the eclipse convergence, when 3 black holes aligned and bent light into spirals of violet and gold, the rust sparrow dropped out of cloak above Sanctum Obscura. The asteroid pulsed with unnatural energy. Figures in obsidian robes chanted in a dead tongue, circling a massive altar carved from meteoric iron. At its center, bound in chains of dark energy, was a captured Xerian child. Another hybrid, meant to be a backup if Lyra failed to appear. But Lyra didn't sneak in. She walked in, alone, unarmed, Nova in hand. The Voidborn leader, a gaunt figure called the Harrower, laughed. You come willingly? Good. Your blood will make the veil tear clean. I'm not here to bleed, Lyra said. I'm here to speak. And then, she did something none of them expected. She placed Nova on the altar, not as a sacrifice but as an offering. This toy was broken, she said, voice ringing clear in the cavernous chamber. But someone saw it was worth fixing. That's the truth you've forgotten. Power isn't about tearing open doors. It's about mending what's been shattered. She raised her hands, not in surrender. In song, a soft, melodic hum, part Xerian lullaby, part human folk tune, filled the chamber. The very air shimmered. The chains around the child dissolved into light. The altar cracked, not from force, but from resonance. The Harrower screamed, No! The ritual! But it was too late. Lyra wasn't opening the veil. She was healing it. Above, the black hole's alignment shifted, not into a tear, but into a bloom. A wave of calm energy spread outward, washing over the Voidborn. Their robes fell away, revealing not monsters, but frightened men and women. Lost souls twisted by centuries of fear. One by one, they dropped to their knees, weeping. Joran watched from the shadows, heart full. He hadn't needed to throw a single punch, because Lyra had done what no warrior could. She turned their darkness into dawn. In the aftermath, the Empress sent a fleet not to conquer but to rebuild. Sanctum Obscura became a sanctuary for the redeemed. The Voidborn were offered healing, not punishment. And Lyra, now hailed not just as heir but as the mender of veils, refused the throne. "I'm not ready to rule from a palace," she told her aunt. "But I will build something better, a school. For orphans. For hybrids. For anyone the galaxy says doesn't belong." And so, on a quiet moon orbiting Erthos Prime, the Rust Sparrow landed for the last time, not as a ship, but as the cornerstone of the Lyra Vey Compassion Institute. Joran didn't leave. He became its head of security. Yes, but also its storyteller, its gardener, its midnight snack smuggler, and its steady hand when storms rolled in, literal and emotional. Children of a dozen species now ran through its halls, laughing, learning, fixing broken toys and broken hearts alike. Years later, on the anniversary of that alleyway rescue, Lyra, taller now, but still with those bright onyx eyes and white braids, stood beside Joran on the school's rooftop garden, watching students launch paper starhoppers into the twilight. "You never told me why you really stayed," she said softly. He smiled, looking out at the sea of young faces, purple, green, blue, human, and everything in between. "Because home isn't a place you find," he said. "It's a place you build. And I've never built anything worth keeping. Until you." She leaned her head on his shoulder. Below, a little violet-skinned girl picked up a dropped toy, examined it, then ran to find the right tool to fix it. And somewhere, in the quiet hum of a school that once was a ship that once was nothing, the universe felt a little less broken. The stars still burned cold and distant. But down here, among the laughter and the mended things, it was more than enough.